Hello, everyone. This is Sean from the Soccer Nostalgia blog. I have the pleasure to interview English author Mr. Graeme Brooke. Mr. Brooke is the author of Adventures of a Tractor Boy, with all profits being donated to the Colchester Hospital Special Care Baby Unit. This interview is separate from a podcast series. This video interview will serve as a companion piece to a written blog presentation on the Ipswich versus Saint Etienne UEFA Cup matches in March 1981. Hello, Graeme. Welcome.
Hello, Sean.
Can you introduce yourself and your affinity to Ipswich?
Yeah, sure. As you said earlier, my name's Graeme Brooke, and I've followed Ipswich Town for 48 years, and I've had a season ticket for just over 40 of those years. I hit 1,000 matches in 2002, which seems many years ago now, and that was against Norwich City of all teams. I've got the famous Matt Holland's framed shirt on the wall of my office at home as a memento. Nicely, after the end of last season, it's now accompanied by a framed shirt signed by Wes Burns to commemorate the promotion from Division 1 up to the Championship. My other claim to fame, as you said, was to write a book, Adventures of a Tractor Boy, which catalogues all of my adventures over the years, and it's made over 4,000 for the Colchester Special Care Baby Unit at Colchester Hospital. This has led to my friendship with two of the club's relatively new US owners, Brett Johnson and Mark Steed. My first year at work was in 1980, and I used all of my first holiday in that year to follow Ipswich Town on their UEFA Cup winning run. In fact, in season 1980-81, I did 61 out of the 66 matches home and abroad.
Where were you at this point in life ahead of these two fixtures in March 1981?
I was a 17-year-old, as I say, just having started out at work. It was my first year in work, and St Etienne, the away leg of the quarter-final, was my first ever European away day adventure. I've done quite a few since, which was then to be followed on by the Cologne semi-final and the AZ67 Alkmaar final in Amsterdam.
What was the state of affairs with Ipswich Town going into the 1980-81 season?
I can't really remember too much from one season to the next. They sort of all sort of seem to blur one into the other. But I would really say that the team or the squad was a very strong 12 or 13 players, as reflected by the fact that we only used 16 or 17 players in total all season, sort of the first choice players plus the substitutes. But I'd say maybe there was a lack of a strong back up, in these days and ages. Teams that are chasing the treble as Ipswich were at that time probably have the full utility of their 25, 26 man squad. I think that probably ultimately cost us the FA Cup and the league, because we were playing 2, 3, sort of sometimes 4 matches a week towards the end of the season to chase on all three fronts, and that did cost us the FA Cup and the league title, but at least we won the UEFA Cup, which was a great feat in itself. And that season we played 66 matches with a very small group of players. I think it did help in one sense that the players all knew each other and knew each other's game, and there was very little rotation. So I think that possibly helped them win the UEFA Cup, but equally that ultimately may have cost them winning more than just the UEFA Cup. And I don't say just the UEFA Cup in a derogatory term. I just think, we got to the FA Cup semi-final and lost after extra time. So that was so close. We beat Aston Villa, who won the league title that year. We beat them 3 times home and away in the league and in the FA Cup. So whilst congratulations to Aston Villa, I would still argue that season Ipswich were by far the best team in England. And although the end league table didn't show it, plus probably the best team in Europe as well.
The transfer activity was rather light, as Bobby Robson appeared satisfied with the squad at hand. Was there dissatisfaction that money was not spent for the European adventure?
Not really at the time. I mean, I still believe we were the best side in Europe. We played consistently. We played really attractive football. We were hard to break down. We were exciting, attacking. But I guess with hindsight, which is obviously a great thing, I think maybe two or three more quality players could have won being greedy, that could have won us the treble. But equally, that could have cost us the UEFA Cup. On the flip side, if you'd got more of a rotation of players and it disrupted the form that they were in. I think certainly towards the end of the season, they looked a very tired, knackered side, if you like. I mean, if you take the semi-final out in Cologne, we played, I think it was on Good Friday. We then went up for a very hard away match at Norwich at Carrow Road in the league on the Monday. We were then straight down to Harwich to get the boat out to Holland to then go on to Germany to play on the Wednesday in the semi-final. Then we got another league match on the Saturday. So in those days there was no where the league does a favour now, where if a team plays midweek in Europe, they put the league matches back to the Sunday or even postpone some of them sometimes, I think, where there was none of those favours done. So yeah, I think it possibly cost us in that we did end up with a very tired squad to the end of the season. But no, I think hindsight's a great thing, really, isn't it?
Let's discuss the backbone of this Ipswich team.
Well, I was sitting sort of prepping for this podcast 3 or 4 nights ago, and I think my wife, I think she has for a long time, thinks I'm incredibly sad because I just sat there and reeled off the away team for the away leg in St Etienne as I wrote it down, and she's like, that's 40 odd years ago, and you can remember that. But I mean, I think that also does maybe highlight that we had that known starting 11 with a couple of other players that were used for the whole of that season. But if you look at Paul Cooper, you had the best uncapped goalkeeper in the country. I think he was very unfortunate to be around at the time. I think recollection it was Shilton and Ray Clements, I think it was, were the two keepers that were playing for England at that time. But you look at Paul Cooper, I mean, even just in that one match against Manchester United that we won 6-0, he saved 3 penalties in that match alone, like 2 penalties, one that was retaken. It had a reputation for being the top penalty stopper. I think he saved something like 12 or 13 in one season. I can't remember if that was the 80-81 season, but it was certainly around that era. You'd then got Mick Mills, who was a very unassuming sort of, not one of these great players that sort of sticks themselves forward, but he got on with the job. He was a fantastic right back for Ipswich in England, sometimes played at left back, and a brilliant captain as well that all the team respected. You'd then got Osman and Butcher, absolutely immense players. I mean, I speak to them on and off nowadays to do with podcasts and to do with my book as well. Really, really nice guys off the pitch as well. But I mean, I don't need to say any more than them that when Kevin Beattie was fit, he was our left back at St Etienne, so Butcher and Osman were keeping Beattie away from playing at that central defensive role. Beattie, I mean, say no more, absolute legend, whether he played at centre half or as he did at left back at St Etienne, wouldn't take any prisoners. I mean, he even beat Sylvester Stallone at arm wrestling in the Escape from Colditz behind the scenes. So great guy. Then you've got the 2 Dutch maestros. I think they were the next overseas players to come to England after Ardiles and Villa. I know I'm biased, but I would probably argue with the different skills that they've got. Tyson with his sort of dribbling attributes and never generally lost the ball. Absolute fantastic player. And then Muir and his left foot was an absolute magic wand. Brilliant players. And then John Walk, I sometimes think he's probably my favourite all-time player, but I've got so many. But I mean, he was a guy that, he played in so many different roles over the years at Ipswich. But that season, 80-81, he was the top scorer, top European goal scorer. I think it was 14 goals on the UEFA Cup run. Box-to-box midfielder. He would always score goals for you. Then you got Eric Gates. I think he got one, maybe two England caps, but again, I think another very unlucky player as far as international honours, with other players presumably that were around at the time. But I mean, I remember him scoring an absolute worldly goal the same day that Justin Fashanu got that goal against Norwich for Norwich in the 5-3 against Liverpool. I was one of 40 or 50 supporters up at Goodison Park, and it wasn't televised, but Eric Gates believe me, he got a better goal than Fashanu that day. Great player. Once he got the ball, defenders rarely got it off him. Paul Mariner, I would argue, a better centre forward than Harry Kane. When you sort of compare the eras, the complete centre forward, he got his just rewards playing for England. Obviously not as many times as Harry Kane, but absolute quality player. And Alan Brazil as well, he was the absolute magic player, a foil for Paul Mariner. And then you just put the team together. There were none of these real huge ego superstar players, but when you put that 11 on the pitch together, my God, could they play as a team together? They were absolute magic team, and I just feel privileged that I was around at that time to watch them, because we've had a bit of glory sort of down in the third tier of English football last season, but which has been lovely. But a lot of the generation now that watches Ipswich couldn't even imagine, that Ipswich were one of the, or if not the best team in Europe at that time.
So I will take the opportunity to introduce Saint Etienne. Incidentally, Saint Etienne's legendary recruiter, Pierre Garonnel, he had described Ipswich as the new Ajax. They would prove to be just as good in these ties. Saint Etienne had been the dominant team in France since the 1960s. They were managed by Robert Herbin, and in their ranks, they had Michel Platini. So the team consisted of Jean Castaneda in goal. In defense, you had Christian Lopez, Patrick Battiston, Gérard Janvion. In midfield, you had Platini with Jean-François Larios. You had the Dutchman Johnny Rep, and two young strikers in Laurent Paganelli and Laurent Rousset. Ipswich had shown excellent home form in the previous rounds, but they had lost away from home. Was there any apprehension prior to the trip to France?
To be honest, I didn't give it a thought that we'd lost in Salonika, we'd lost out in Poland at Widzew Łódź, and Bohemians in Prague in Czechoslovakia. But I did feel a bit nervous en route when reminded that St Etienne had never lost at home in Europe since the early 60s. And as you mentioned, the quality players that they had. It got even worse when we were a goal down after less than 20 minutes. But once we equalised, we put in the best display that I've ever witnessed by an Ipswich Town team in over 1,500 matches.
This first match on March 4th at Saint Etienne at Geoffroy Guichard. Saint Etienne started with Castaneda, Battiston, Bernard Gardon, Christian Lopez, Jean-Louis Zanon, Gérard Janvion, Larios, Platini, Paganelli, Rousset. He'd be replaced by Jacques Zimaco in the 55th minute, and Johnny Rep. Ipswich started with Cooper, Mills, Osman, Beattie, Butcher, Tyson, Wark, Muren, Brazil, Eric Gates, and Paul Mariner. Saint Etienne actually took the lead in the 16th minute when Johnny Rep headed the first goal. Paul Mariner tied the match in the 28th minute. The score remained level until halftime, but 2 minutes into the second half, Arnold Muren scored with a beautiful long-range shot from outside of the box. And that just demoralized Saint Etienne. From then on, Ipswich took control, and they would score two further goals by Paul Mariner in the 57th minute and John Wark in the 77th minute. Ipswich just overran them and physically outplayed Saint Etienne. That was the main takeaway from this display. Platini said that Ipswich first goal had disoriented the team, and their manager said that the second goal by Miron had just killed the team. Platini also pointed out that Saint Etienne were playing with two 18-year-olds up front, while Ipswich was playing with men up front. So what was your takeaway from witnessing this match?
Well, firstly, I remember the long trip we sort of set off overnight, sort of trains from East Anglia down to the Kent coast, and then got the boat over from Dover to Dunkirk, a boat train to Paris, and then it wasn't just to Paris, it was another 250 miles further south that we did. We bumped into, I mean, there were literally hundreds, if not thousands, of Saint Etienne fans that did that trip from Paris, you know, every time they had a home game. But we had a great lot of banter with them. They were telling us that we were wasting our time. The most we'd get out of it was a nice holiday and lots of banter. We sort of travelled down there because we travelled independently. We were sold tickets by Ipswich in a small area of the main stand, away from the main Ipswich fans that were behind the goal on the terracing. We got in there nice and early and decided to entertain the French with a pre-match singing of God Save the Queen and Rule Britannia. But when like water bottles and various other stuff started getting thrown at us, we thought probably better to keep quiet and sit down and wait for the match to start. The match started and it was a night of exhilarating football from Town, who responded in just the right way after going a goal down in 16 minutes. Town produced the best display that I've ever witnessed, and I've seen some amazing ones, including like that 6-0 against Man United and many other matches. But they just literally dominated the match. You know, that seemed to sort of stir them into, you know, sort of almost wake them up. And then, as you say, they sort of equalised, took it to half time, and then got 3 goals in the second half and were absolutely outstanding. We had a very hairy exit after the match. No Ipswich colours or anything, all hidden because the French fans were baying for blood at that time. We got smuggled back to the railway station by a couple of expats in a Mini. And there was like 3 of us, the 2 of them. So if you can imagine 5 in the Mini, and one of my friends was a very rotund, large guy as well, you know. But we literally got smuggled back there, went quietly into the railway station, and we were minding our own business, waiting for the train for about an hour. And then the next minute, we you know, about half an hour, 40 minutes on, we heard them shouting, English guys, you know, and we think, oh my God. And then we thought we were going to be in a lot of trouble here. But it was some of the French guys that had travelled down from Paris earlier in the day, and they came over and they were full of congratulations and a crate of Heineken as well to make the journey a bit more pleasant. And there was no bother at all. But they were what you'd call true supporters. Obviously, they're doing a 500-mile round trip for every home game, as opposed to the ones that were sort of roaming around outside the stadium trying to find any English blood that they could do. So we then arrived back in Paris, probably the early hours of the morning, pretty well lubricated. We decided to go and find the Eiffel Tower because we've got some time to spare before we were heading back to the French coast. So we sat in a cafe with a bottle of champagne and croissants and singing Ipswich songs, and quite happy with life. Ironically, that little anecdote was used by I think it was called Never Lost at Home, which was a play that was done at the New Wolsey Theatre a year or 2 back to commemorate the anniversary of 40 years of Ipswich winning the UEFA Cup. They took that story and one of my stories from when I was out in Cologne as well. Then we sort of travelled back and got, in those days you could travel from France to England quite quickly on the hovercraft. So we got that back from Calais back over and got home very happy with life, and a bit of a headache the next day.
Well, after this result, the second leg was more or less a formality at this point at home. The second leg at Portman Road was on March 18. Saint Etienne only made one change. This time Zimaco started ahead of Paganelli. But Ipswich were forced to make a couple of changes for this match, as Mick Mills and Kevin Beattie were out. So Kevin Steggles and Steve McCall replaced them in defense. This match on March 18 for Ipswich, you have Cooper, Butcher, McCall, Osman, Steggles, Muren, Tyson, Wark, Brazil. He'd be replaced by Kevin O'Callaghan in the 53rd minute. Paul Mariner skippered in Mick Mills's absence. Then you have Eric Gates, and he'd be replaced by Mitch DeVray in the 73rd minute. Saint Etienne, you have Castaneda, Battiston, Gardon, Lopez, Zanon, Janvion, Larios, Platini, Zimaco, Rousset, and Rep. So the score was scoreless until halftime. Early in the second half, Butcher headed in Franz Tyson's free kick. With 10 minutes remaining, Saint Etienne tied the match with Zimaco heading in Johnny Rep's cross. A few minutes later, Larios handled in the penalty box. John Wark scored from a penalty kick. And just before the end, Paul Mariner scored a third goal. All in all, it was a rather uneventful match because, like I said, the tie was more or less settled. What do you remember yourself from this match?
To be honest, I was racking my brains the other night, and I'm afraid I've got relatively limited memories of this match. I think, you sort of talk about the first leg, and I think because it's such a sort of memory on sort of football and life for me, and always will be, because it was such an outstanding performance. This game, we were never going to lose, by 4 or 5 at home to St Etienne. So I do remember feeling very confident, obviously, because we won the first leg 4-1, albeit a little bit of trepidation, because I think over the years, even in the good years and the bad years, you always have that little bit of a worry that your team's not going to do what you expect them to do. But I certainly never expected that we would lose that match. So this, I believe, is the owning England. Well, Ipswich, I know Ipswich are the only team in England that have never lost at home in Europe. So I don't think I ever really believed that we would even lose the match to St Etienne. But as I say, I think it was the 4-1 away game almost made that a non-event for the second leg. I think it's funny, it probably took off a little bit of the magic of the performance from the fact we'd won so convincingly in the first leg. But it's the same. I mean, you take the Ipswich against Exeter match last season that we needed to win to guarantee automatic promotion back to the Championship. We were 3-0 up, I think, in the first 20 minutes and 5-0 up in 32 minutes. And I still heard someone in the stand complaining that the second half would be a non-event because we were so far ahead. And I'm thinking, God, far rather, as in this case before, 1 up against St Etienne and sort of watch a relatively mediocre non-event in the second leg than needing to score a goal in the last minute to go through, or as Ipswich last year, to get promotion, but I guess you can't keep everyone happy all of the time, can you?
Afterwards, the Saint Etienne president, Roger Rocher, he said that Ipswich were the best team that they had ever faced in Europe at home. So it was high praise indeed for their performance. Having defeated such a strong side away from home, was there a feeling that Ipswich, at this point, was there a feeling that Ipswich could win this trophy? And in a way, had this win given Ipswich the necessary confidence to go on and win this trophy, you think?
To be honest, I never really think or thought that far ahead. As soon as the draw was made for Cologne in the semi-finals, who were of the Tony Woodcock fame, he was like the English trailblazer playing out in Germany in the Bundesliga at the time. I just felt it's a tough draw, but I felt quietly confident after the St Etienne results. But we did make hard work of it, 1-0 home and away. I think Ipswich generally played with a great belief and confidence for most of the season, but the St Etienne fan certainly gave a boost that of what they were potentially capable of.
In closing, how are these matches with Saint Etienne regarded by the faithful fans of the side? And is it still referenced today, or do younger fans have no idea about this era?
Well, I think for me it was a bit of stunned belief, and at that point I think it was finally sort of sinking in what a really good side Ipswich were and could potentially be. As far as the younger fans in relation to that era, I'm not really convinced that they do appreciate quite how good Ipswich were. I'm sure us older generation, whenever we get an opportunity, like to bore the pants off them, telling them how great a team we were then. But I think that probably for me, the saddest thing about how good Ipswich were at that time was that there was very, very little social media or filming. I mean, you can get a very, very scratchy, poor quality video on YouTube of the away leg in St Etienne, but when you can compare nowadays, you know, you watch Ipswich out in Austria pre-season training at the moment. You know, they're causing viral videos of like football cricket and things like in the mountains, you know, on the football pitch in the middle of nowhere, you know, where you look at, say, the St Etienne match, and there's very little that, you know, media that, you know, gives you that historical content that you can sort of show people and sort of look how good we really were. But I think up until like going up last year, and we, you know, whilst it's fantastic to have a bit of glory again, we must still remember that is the third tier of English football that we've just got promoted from, you know, in comparison, and that's not undermining anything at all. You know, it's the first step of, I'm confident, our way back to the Premier League over the next few years. But I still think it can't take away from the fact of, you know, you had a team that was so close to winning the Football League. Again, if they hadn't run out of steam, I'm sure they would have pipped Aston Villa to the title. They were extra time of the FA Cup semi-final, you know, and they lost very late on in that one. And that was the game that Kevin Beattie broke his arm in as well. So, you know, that just summed up our luck at the time. And then we went on and we did win the UEFA Cup, you know. So that was an amazing team. And I think unless you were there, you know, no matter how much I or anyone else talks about it and has lovely memories in our heads, those people that, you know, up until last season endured 20 years of pretty much misery, apart from a League Cup semi-final in 2012 or 13, whenever it was. I think they'd almost think we'd been on the happy pills when we were talking about it.
With that, I'd like to thank you for this interview and sharing of your memories. And I would urge everyone to please read the main blog article for more detail. The link is included on the video upload description, along with our respective contact information.
If anyone has enjoyed the anecdotes, there's in my book many pages sort of really outlining it. And as I say, it's for a good cause. So if people go on to www.adventuresofattractorboy.co.uk, click on the homepage and then click on the Amazon tile, that will get them the book, and it's a snippet, £6.97, I think it is.
All these links are included in the blog and the YouTube upload. So thank you once more.
Pleasure.